Hi, dear comrades. My name is Patrick Bond. I'm a professor at UJ, and they call me an expert on this institution because I've written 4 books. Over the last 40 years, I've seen every trick in the book. You saw a small one. We're listening, and then they run away. That was a small trick. The big tricks I hear from you. You're the experts telling us about especially austerity and the climate catastrophe. I don't think they were hearing, and I'm sure that they will continue to promote the same austerity that's written down. And we heard from Comrade Wafa, this is not just the austerity that you've talked about today, which is the education cuts, the lack of housing, the ineffective cash income, right? The welfare grants, the elder care. That's part of it. But Wafa's right. They actually write in their loans, starting with the IMF in August 2020, that there must be fiscal consolidation, a fancy term, budget cuts. You're absolutely right. And when Wafa says this goes back to 1996 gear, reverse gear, growth, employment, and redistribution. It was when the World Bank ideology became policy under Trevor Manuel, the then finance minister. And I happened to work in President Mandela's office. And he completely shut our reconstruction and development program because that World Bank was pushing its experts in, and that meant austerity then. And then we had a period of higher growth because of high commodity prices. The next trick, which you've been hearing about, causing austerity, we have to repay the World Bank for a $3.75 billion loan. That's more than 70 billion rand for that Medupi. We heard Comrade Justine from Abahlali say, what did we get from that? Much more pollution. They're using the water, the scarce water, to cool the coal-fired power plant. She said this is the 4th largest plant in the world. The emissions from that plant, 35 million tons a year when it's working. Now, is Medupi working? Is Medupi working? It's not. It's called load shedding. Stage 4, stage 5, because they made a loan that went, who did it benefit the most? A company called Hitachi. How did Hitachi get the loan in 2007? They bribed the African National Congress through the Chancellor House. I use that word without fear of slander or libel lawsuits because the United States prosecuted it under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And Hitachi paid a fine for bribing, for an inducement payment to the African National Congress, giving them 1/4 of Hitachi Power Africa. It's a German guy called Klaus-Dieter Rennert. And earlier this year we saw in his emails he wanted to do that because these emails became public because he knew the chair of Eskom, named Vali Musa, the chair of Eskom, was on the ANC Finance Committee, and if you work with Eskom and give the ANC part of your profits, you're going to get the contract. The procurement, the tenderpreneurship starts with a company called Hitachi with their manager for South Africa called Klaus-Dieter Rennert. That's the core of our worst case of corruption. They made the loans knowing that Hitachi had given the ANC this inducement because it was public knowledge in 2008 and the loan was 2010. Do they owe reparations for a corrupt loan that spews carbon into the atmosphere and also does damage to the women of Abahlali? Do they owe reparations? I'm hearing yes. And that means we look at the rest.
Yes.
They do owe reparations.
Yes.
The second part of the reparations claim on the climate is all of the fossil fuels they're still doing. 2019, $2 million, which is about 39 billion rand, that they gave to Transnet for a liquefied natural gas plant in Richards Bay. I was there Thursday with SETSI, South Urban Community Environmental Alliance. They're trying to stop the LNG. Why? It's 85 times worse than methane. The methane is worse than CO2 over a 20-year period. Now the dilemma, the diabolical feature is that where do you get LNG if it goes to the port in Richards Bay? You ship it in from northern Mozambique. What's happening in northern Mozambique? There's a war. We call this the blood methane. You know, blood diamonds, blood methane. The World Bank is a major investor in northern Mozambique. And even our own SANDF troops, our SANDF, are in northern Mozambique to protect Total Energies. Now that's going on now. It's a current commitment of this World Bank to fossil fuels. And you know the name Fikile Njingazi. Long live the spirit of Fikile. She was assassinated trying to stop a coal mine called Tendele Coal in Somkele, northern KZN. Do you remember, comrades?
Yes,
3 years ago. Who was the original funder? We know it was Standard and Nedbank, IDC, but the original funder, 2002 to 2005, the World Bank. Now, if we go back to apartheid, they were also lending for Eskom, coal-fired power plant after coal-fired power plant. How many of your parents, your grandparents, during apartheid, how many got the electricity from Eskom funded by the World Bank? I didn't think so. None of you. None of your parents, none of your grandparents, because it was a racist Eskom that this World Bank was happy from 1951 to 67. Now, these are the sort of facts that we're going to put onto the table, because the World Bank in 2019 lost diplomatic immunity in the Supreme Court in the US. There can be a reparations lawsuit against their climate destruction. And if we put the things like their Lonmin loan in Maracana just before the massacre, 5,000 houses never appeared. Workers were angry. The World Bank was deeply invested in Lonmin along with Shanduka. The head of Shanduka wrote emails on August 15, 2012 to protect the World Bank investment. They said, the emails, there's dastardly criminals. Dastardly criminals. Who wrote those emails? We know Cyril Ramaphosa. And in writing the emails, a day later a massacre, right? To protect a World Bank loan and his investment, and Lonmin, which was called in London by the British Tory, the Conservative Prime Minister, the unacceptable face of capitalism. That's the degree to which the 1%, including the ones here, have degenerated. We could go on, because my 4 books about the World Bank have even more stories. But we must just ask the question. The dear men in blue, we thank you. Not those, they're just useless. These are protecting us from the Tutsis. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Manla.